Hi, everyone. I am not running tonight's webinar, but I do have the honor of introducing the wonderful person who is. It's Mrs. Rona Novick. A good Chaydesh to all of you. I hope everyone is well. We are fortunate to have Mrs. Novick this evening, and she is the Dean of YU Graduate School of Education. She's a practicing psychologist. She just wrote a children's book on helping children deal with their challenges, which I think I'm going to run out and get for my grandchildren. And we're very privileged to have her here this evening addressing us on building resilience, life skills to cope with life's challenges. And Rona, we usually start within about 3 minutes of our appointed time.
Okay.
Because sometimes, you know, people's babies are crying or their computers crash, as happened to me about 2 minutes ago.
Okay.
So we'll have a little patience here. I just want to say that, Rona, I heard you speak at Lubavitcher Yeshiva. I actually introduced you.
Okay. Which one? At where? At where?
At Lubavitcher Yeshiva. It was a while ago. In Crown Heights.
In Crown Heights.
It was a while back.
Okay.
I don't even remember what year. You spoke for a group. I don't even remember the name of the group that brought you out. And I walked away a newly educated person because you really turned everything I thought about bullying on its head.
Now I remember. Now I remember. Yes. Yes.
I was called like the day before and told about the event. I didn't see any advertising about it, and I was called about the event by one of the organizers, and then I was asked would I MC it.
Right.
I didn't even know what was happening, so I canceled my plans for the evening, and I came, and I was really glad that I did. I was really glad I did, because you really gave me a very important perspective on bullying, so thank you for that. It's 8:03, and so take it away, Rona.
Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. Because I have the slides on the screen, I don't necessarily easily see the chat. So if somebody has a question, wants to interrupt at some point, unmute your microphone and just get my attention. I would like this to be, as much as possible, two things. First, a dialogue and not a lecture. And secondly, I want it to be of maximal help to you. So if you have a question, if there is something you don't understand, if there's something you want clarified, or there's a particular issue you're struggling with that is relevant to what we're talking about, and you'd like some input, by all means. I will leave time at the end for questions, but don't feel that we have to wait. And if you type them into the chat room, just realize I'm not going to see them while the slides are up. I can look at them later when we get to questions. So just a bit about me. I am a clinical psychologist. I have my doctorate in child clinical psychology. I find myself in this strange position of being the dean of a graduate school of Jewish education. And I am passionate about how we either support parents or schools or any agency or organization that works with children to best become centers of growth for those children and agents of growth promotion. And I think that Mechaneches have an unbelievable opportunity to do so much more than build children in terms of their academics, that schools are a place that we can grow children in every potential way. We grow their neshamas, we grow their bodies, we grow their minds, and we grow them as social beings. But, you know, children's life does not come without challenges, the same way that adult life doesn't come without challenges. So how do we, as leaders in schools and with our faculty that is charged with, they have so much on their plate, we're asking them to do so much in terms of teaching and communicating content. How do we deal with challenges? And the first thing I'd like you to do is to just have in your mind something that challenges you, a crisis, a trauma, or an ongoing difficulty or situation. I'm going to turn the slides off for a minute so that I can see the chat room. And if you're on the computer and you have the opportunity, along the bottom of the screen in the Zoom window, there's a chat button. And if you hit the chat button, then you will get a window and you can type a message. So I would like people to share, if you don't mind, it doesn't have to be too personal, but share something that challenges you and share something that challenges your student. I'm doing it right now. Wonderful. Yes. Shidduchim. Huge. Thank you, Dina, for sharing that. I shared mine. I'm hoping other people will share some of their challenges and think about what challenges your students. Now, obviously, if you have older students, Shidduchim may be a challenge for your students. But we're typing into the chat room things that we experience as challenges. Okay. Going back, it just takes me a minute to go back to the slides. So if we look at the things that challenge us, we will find very quickly that challenges fall into categories. There are some of the issues, some of the challenges that are personal or internal, meaning they're going to come with us wherever we are. If there's a health issue, if I have a particular emotional challenge, I'm very sensitive, I'm very shy, if I have a learning challenge, or based on my temperament. And we'll get back to temperament. You know what, maybe I'll just say about temperamental challenges here. Temperament is a well-established phenomena that is kind of our preset mode of operating, our preferred preset mode of operating, and it is noticeable in the earliest days of an infant's life. Just go into a newborn nursery and you will find some infants who, when they are wet or when they are hungry, sound like this. And barely move around. And then you'll find some infants who are, you know, messing in their cradle and they're screaming, "Wow!" when they're upset. That's a temperamental factor of intensity. And any of us who've had more than one children know that they come markedly different from birth, and some can be extremely intense in their temperament, and some could be really chill and laid back. Another temperamental factor is how well you deal with novelty and change. Think about how life is for someone who really has trouble with change and newness, compared to how much easier it is to go through your days if you're the kind of person who, just the way you're made, your temperament means, oh, I love challenge. I like new things. I like when things are different. It's okay that, you know, the regular teacher didn't show up today and we don't have gym, and instead our field trip got canceled and we're doing this, and fine, no problem. We all know children who are not like that and who have extreme difficulty with change. So those are the internal factors that we carry with us. But then on the other side of this slide are all of the external factors. And at least when I first looked at what people were writing in the chat room, a lot of us were writing extrinsic or external challenges. And these can be both naturally occurring challenges as well as man-made crises. They could be a hurricane, and or they could be a man-made crisis of poverty, a family that has lost things because of a financial crisis, The ongoing challenge, the external challenge might be even a simcha. Even I'm dealing with one family where the eldest in the family just got married, but that's causing enormous challenge for the younger children in the family, who was very exciting, was very nice when the chasana happened, but now there's less focus on them because there's the new chassan and kala who are getting a lot of attention. External challenges can also come from ongoing stressors like poverty or loneliness. And of course, things like divorce and bereavement and any other transitions, a move, things like that, a new job can be an external challenge for an adult, and that can trickle down and have impact on children. Think about the children in your setting. And because I've given this presentation in co-ed settings or in girl and boys, I've given a girl and a boy example, but you could just as easily have both of these be girls. Imagine Dvorah. She makes a mistake and she crumples up her paper. "I'm so stupid," she mumbles under her breath. You notice she's quiet the remainder of the morning. At lunch, Bastya asks for her to help design some flyers for an upcoming event, and Dvorah says, "I can't draw." Now imagine, I'm going to change it from Moshe to Yehudis. Yehudis trips on her way to the soccer field. She laughs and she says, I hope I do better. She says to her best friend, during the game, Yehudis misses a kick, and a peer teases her and says, you'd better practice, Yehudis. And she nods and says, yeah, and she keeps playing. After the game, let's say Shira asks her to, are we going, let's walk to class together. And Yehuda says, yeah, okay, I'll go, but that class is really hard. Look at the difference in the way these two students, these two young people confront the world. And we've met these students. We've all met the Dvorah, who a small challenge or problem, and it becomes a big to-do, or she shuts down. And we've all met the Yehudises, who just seem to be able to get back up when they fall down, literally, and get on with it. What is resilience, and what do we mean when we talk about resilience? So the American Psychological Association has a wonderful publication called The Road to Resilience, and they define resilience. You can find it on their website, the American Psychological Association. They say that resilience is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant stress. They go on to explain on their website that resilience is that quality that allows some people to be knocked down by life and come back stronger than ever. Rather than letting failure overcome them and drain their resolve, they find a way to rise from the ashes. Even after misfortune, resilient people are blessed with such an outlook that they're able to change course and soldier on. I know that we just celebrated the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, Holocaust Remembrance Day. If you heard on any of the news, stories, interviews, maybe you have personal experience of survivors, many of them are the picture of this definition, who despite the horrors that they were forced to live through, they were able to bounce back. There is a reason that the picture that I have on this slide is of palm trees in a hurricane. Palm trees are an incredibly resilient natural entity in that these palm trees are dealing with 60-mile-an-hour winds. And so they're bending, but they don't break. They don't uproot, and they don't snap in half. Because they have this give to them, they can change during the trauma and the stress, but then bounce back. Now, this is, when you read this definition of resilience, it really seems like, are we asking for people to be superhuman? We're not even saying that being resilient means I coped, I got through it. Oh, am I a wreck now after that trauma or tragedy or stress? We're saying no, resilience is not only did you cope, but you're you're thriving and flourishing and you're doing so well. Now, with children, I really think, and with adolescents, our goal should be tempered. Yes, it's wonderful to be this kind of person who can take adversity and smile and find the good in everything. But what we really want for children and adolescents, for our students in our schools, is we want them to be able to cope. We want them to have coping skills. This slide is just about the exact notion. There's a lot of discussion among psychologists about whether, when we're in crisis, when we're dealing with a stress, it's actually a great opportunity for growth, that we are loosened up, that we are not our typical selves, and therefore resilience isn't just bouncing back, it's actually bouncing forward. We're able, after dealing with stress, to come out of it and actually be kind of a new person. But there's a machlokas here. There are psychologists who don't agree with this and who say it's unfair to say somebody dealing with stress should go through it and come out better than before. Isn't it good enough that somebody deals with the stress and that we give them the skills to cope with it? Now, if we're going to talk about how we as mechanchos and we as educators can support children's resilience, then we have to recognize that resilience is not innate. It is not something that we are born with. Of course, we are born with temperament and we are born with skills. There are some children who are just inherently have an easier temperament and are more easygoing. There are some children who are born blessed with stronger cognitive skills. There are some children born more easily engaged socially. But resilience is not genetically inborn. It's something that comes about from the way children learn to think and act when they're faced with obstacles. What that means is that the road to resilience comes first and foremost from children's supportive relationships with parents, teachers, and other caring adults. It's up to us to pave this road to resilience. When we help young people cultivate an approach to life that views obstacles as a critical part of success, we help them develop resilience. We are resilience agents. And if we, chas v'shalom, I'm sure nobody does this in their school, if we take somebody's poor exam paper and rip it up and say, that's it, I'm done with you, you obviously can't learn, then we are the opposite of resilience agents. But we're going to tonight think about what are the specific ways that we can help promote resilience. I'll just share with you a little bit of research about stress and about coping, because there are some people who would say, well, isn't our job as educators to just insulate children from stress? Wouldn't it be better if we just create stress-free schools? Maybe we shouldn't give grades. Maybe we shouldn't give so much homework. Let's just decrease the stress. Won't that help? But it turns out that it may actually be that stress and exposure to stress may actually make us stronger. Stress may strengthen us. It's called the stealing effect. And there are two studies that document this. If you jump out of an airplane to do a parachute jump, not that I would ever do this, you'd have to pay me more than millions of dollars to ever get me to jump out of a parachute. But if you study people who jump out of an airplane, you will find, you measure their blood pressure, their heart rate, they are very stressed. And they'll tell you, I'm very stressed, this is very nerve-wracking. But if you do it over and over again, each time that you do another jump, your physiological response, your body's stress response becomes tamped down. You really become used to it. You become less afraid and less stressed because you've done it. Now, we don't need something as radical as parachute jumps to think about this. Research on children has shown that, some children, whether it's for something as simple and straightforward as a tonsillectomy, whether it's for something, chas v'shalom, much more serious, needs to be hospitalized, the child needs to be hospitalized. It turns out that if the child has already had the stress of other healthy separations, mom and dad have gone away to a simcha and the child has been with grandma and grandpa or Bubby and Zadie. Mom and dad went on business and a babysitter stayed, or an older married sibling came and stayed with the child. Those early healthy separations actually make children better able to deal with the stress of being separated and hospitalized. But what is it in this exposure to stress that results in making me stronger versus maybe I go to an airplane or I'm separated from my parents and I get sensitized and I say, oh my gosh, it's the worst thing ever. I never, ever want to be apart from my mommy and tati. Then the stress doesn't build resilience. And it turns out that what helps when stress happens is coping, that our bodies are pretty much geared to get used to and to adapt to stress, that mentally we can habituate or get used to stress, and that what's really important is our cognitive redefinition. How do we frame this experience? If I say, I was pushed out of the airplane, it was the most traumatic things ever, and I never want to do it again, versus, wow, do you know what the earth looks like from up there? This was mind-blowing. It was amazing. I'm going to have a very different response the next time I do it. And the last piece here is a concept that is so important, and we're going to come back to this again tonight because it really is our job as educators to build this, and that's something called self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is not self-esteem. Self-esteem is how do I feel about myself. Self-efficacy is how competent do I believe myself to be. Self-esteem, how good do I feel about myself? I might feel really good about myself even though I think I'm really lousy at X. I'm really lousy at art. I still could have very high self-esteem. Self-efficacy is, do I see myself as someone who could succeed at this? And where does self-efficacy come from? How do we build a sense that I am an effective person from our past experience? It comes from having success experiences and from having adults in our lives help us understand when we don't have success, how do we build towards that, and how are failures and mistakes okay? So if we have all of these things in place, then stress becomes a way that we get stronger. So we've got to think about how do we build coping? And if we think about, I don't know, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment so I can go back to the, so I can go back to see in the chat room. Challenge for your students is being happy and grateful. Challenge for students between the relationships with their parents, good. Not hours in the day your students struggle with anxiety, that's great. Those are great. Shayna, yes, the difference between self-confidence, or not self-confidence. Self-confidence and self-efficacy really are the same. It's self-esteem and self-efficacy that are not the same. Self-esteem is, how good do I feel about myself? Now, here's a classic way to think about it. I could draw 10 ugly, horrible pictures, and my self-esteem might still be fine because I don't care about art. I don't care about drawing pictures. So it doesn't make me feel bad about myself that I just drew 10 bad pictures. But it does impact my self-efficacy as an artist. I'm not going to see myself as a competent artist because I just drew 10 bad pictures. I still might feel great about myself. I don't care about art. So that's okay. They're two separate things. They're both important. We want children to have healthy self-esteem, But healthy self-esteem without also some really valid sense of my self-efficacy, of what I'm capable of doing and what I'm reasonably sure I can succeed at, is just very empty. Imagine someone walking around saying, I feel great about myself. I'm a failure at everything, but I feel great. I just love myself to pieces. That's not a very healthy child, and that's not a successful young adult we want. We want people to love themselves, feel good about themselves, but also feel that they can be effective you don't have to be effective in every area in your life, but there are places in which I can be an effective human being. I feel like I'm going to be able to do this. So if we go to some of our students' challenges, being happy and grateful, their relationships with their parents, their worries about not having enough time in the day, how do we help students cope with these kinds of challenges? And what exactly is coping? So coping is defined as conscious. In other words, we're aware of this. Coping is not something that's mysterious. And volitional. That means I decide to do it. Coping is also, it's not something that happens by accident. It's a deliberate effort to regulate emotion. I'm going to try to control how I'm feeling. To regulate cognition, I'm going to try to control how I'm thinking. Behavior, I'm going to try to control what I do and how I act. Physiology, I'm going to try to control my breathing, my heart rate, what's going on in my body. I feel like I might throw up. Nope, I'm not going to do that. And the environment, an effort to regulate the environment. I am not going to look at that scary part of the movie. I'm not going to sit next to that student who nudges me. I'm regulating the environment in response to stressful events or circumstances. I have a young girl I'm working with now who is very, very anxious about time management and about, there aren't enough hours in the day and how am I going to get things done? And one of the things that she does, which is not a good coping response or strategy, is that she endlessly looks at her schedule and says, oh my gosh, look at all that's due. Oh my gosh, I'm never going to get it done. Oh my gosh, look at the calendar. It's so full. This is not at all regulating her emotion, behavior, cognition, physiology in response to the real stressful event that she has a lot to do and not a lot of time. It's a strategy that is not effective. But we can teach coping strategies, we can model coping strategies, and the one thing we can't do is we can't ever say, here is strategy X. Let's say the coping strategy is breathing, and we're going to talk about different strategies in a minute. This is going to work for everyone in every situation. We can't say that. So one of the things we have to do when we teach coping strategies and when we introduce concepts of resilience is help students and young people understand that this is going to be a little bit of their personal experiment. And it's okay to try something and find it doesn't work for you. It will take a little bit of effort to figure out what works for you. And the fact that it works for Shayna or Shira or Abasya or Dvora does not mean that it has to work for you. You may find something that is very different. One of the key components of coping is this notion of self-regulation. And self-regulation it's such a gift if we can give this to our students. For those of you who work with older students, with adolescents, what I find, a frame that I find really helpful for adolescents is, because no adolescent wants to hear, you have to control your anger. They don't want anybody telling them how to feel or when to feel. But with adolescents, if I ask the question, who's in charge of you? Your moods or you? Who's the boss of your life? Your anger or you? Who decides the way you talk with your friends or who you call or don't call, who you get, you or your fear? Who's the boss? Excuse me. And since adolescents don't like the idea of being bossed around by anybody or anything, the idea that their emotions are in charge of them rather than they being in charge of their emotions is compelling, and it makes them want to develop self-regulation skills. Self-regulation skills is exactly that. It's either initiating or avoiding or limiting or maintaining or modulating a feeling in its form, its intensity, how long it is, and the behavior that goes with that feeling. So in other words, I decide how angry I'm going to be. I'm known in my family as the person who's really successful at getting the cable company to give me a better deal, or getting a refund when something bad happens on an airline flight. And I know that I don't get on the phone and yell and scream like a mad woman. I'm very calculated at how angry I'm going to get, how nice I'm going to be until I need to ask to speak to a manager, etc. I'm very controlled about it. And I don't think I would be as successful if I got on the phone and I raved at them. They would just, hang up or say, I'm not going to deal with you, Mrs. Customer. So the idea of getting as angry as I want and self-regulating, it's an amazing skill to give our students. It is something that develops over time. Just a part of it happens naturally as what's called the executive attention system, which is this part of our brain, the frontal part of our brain, develops. We know, by the way, that is the last part of our brain to mature. By late adolescence, much of our brain is exactly the same as it will be in our adult years, except here. The frontal cortex is still not fully developed in adolescence. So that's part of our challenge, but that's not the only way that self-regulation develops. It also develops through socialization. We all know, particularly in our community where there are very clear standards of behavior and acceptable norms, we know I don't go to shul in my bathrobe. I restrain myself from that kind of behavior. I'm socialized to know what is appropriate dress and comportment and behavior for shul. And educational and social experiences also help me develop self-regulation. I have a mom who says, use your words, not your hands, when I'm upset. I have a dad or a teacher who says, I see that you're very angry, but you cannot slam the door when you leave the classroom. Can you come back and close the door quietly? All of those are educational and social experiences that show a developing person how I should learn to regulate myself. The fact that this develops over time, once again, means it's teachable. If it develops over time and if it's impacted by these experiences, then we could create experiences that do that. I happen to love this chart. It's something that was developed and put out about 3 years ago. 3 years ago, it was 2017, by the New Jersey Board of Ed. And what they call it are social emotional competencies and subcompetencies. And the reason I've put it here is that as we get to strategies, some of us are going to start to feel like, oh my goodness, given the day school curriculum, given the limited time in the day and how much I have to cover, when am I doing this building resilience? But I give you this slide because I think that many of our teachers are already doing many things in this chart, and they're not thinking of them as social emotional skills. They're doing them as part of their academic work. So look, for example, under the responsible decision-making category, and things like identify the consequence, evaluate personal ethical safety and civic impact of decisions. Well, it might not be civic impact of decisions, but evaluating the impact of your decisions, something you do in your science class. It's something that you identify consequences that follow from actions, even as you're reading Chumash. We do social awareness, looking at the feelings of others, taking another perspective every time we read a text, and try to understand how the author was feeling, or how the author of the text wants to help us understand how the characters are feeling. So I give this to you partly so that you give chizuk to your teachers whenever you see them doing anything, either through the content of what they teach or the process of how they teach, that bolsters any of these skills, that they may not think they're building resilience at that moment, but they are. Even something as simple as, and I don't know if anybody here works with early childhood, but even the first thing under self-awareness of recognizing one's feelings and thoughts, every time that we point to that silly poster of how am I feeling today with all the different feelings, or every time we ask preschoolers, show me your happy face, or show me your who's sad today, can I see your sad face? We're helping them with self-awareness. Okay. I want to talk now, as we talk about how do we build resilience in students, the metacognition, or being meta to this work. What does it mean to be meta? It's easiest for me to explain it in the context of metacognition, although this is really more than that. So this is meta-resilience. Metacognition refers to the fact that we can teach students that 2 + 2 is 4. Or we could teach meta to that. We can say, what do you do in your mind when you have to add 2 + 2 to get 4? What is your thought process? How do you get from point A to point B? So in terms of doing this with resilience, the first issue is transparency. Metacognition is by definition transparent. We're unlike saying, I'm the teacher, I'm telling you 2 + 2 is 4, write it in your notebook. Whenever we're being meta, we're saying we're going to together learn what's going on here. So in terms of resilience, that means I am not doing this to you. I'm not making you, my students, resilient. Together, we are going to learn about resilience, build our resilience muscles and coping skills, and we're going to learn together what works for us, what doesn't work for us. We're going to be really open that that's what we're doing. I'm not going to sneak in a little resilience quiz or have a pop resilience lesson and not tell you I'm teaching resilience. Now, I will say that at times, particularly with adolescents, walking in a room and saying, today I'm going to work on social emotional learning and your coping skills is a recipe for disaster. Sometimes we do need to couch it, even though we're being transparent and saying, I want to help you develop a set of skills that are going to serve you really well in life. Calling them by the, social emotional learning, coping skills, resilience, may turn them off, and saying, these are skills that will help you deal with challenges in your first job, challenges as you work together with a mate in the future to build your, please God, your Bais Neman. These are skills that are going to come in handy. By doing this, we empower students. We don't ever want to say, like I said before, here's a strategy, this is what you're going to use all the time. We want to say, we want to build a toolbox for you. We want you to fill that toolbox with whatever you think is going to be helpful and is going to work. But realize The tools may need to come out at different times and for different purposes. And a tool that worked yesterday might not work today. You may need a new one. And the third part, excuse me. The third part of being meta is we also want to model. I'm recovering from a cold. Take a minute. Write any questions you have in the chat room while I get my voice. Okay, hopefully that's better. Okay. When we go through our normal day, we engage in coping skills all the time. So we might be angry, but we don't show it. We might be frustrated, but we don't stamp our feet and have a temper tantrum. But our students don't know that we're using our coping skills. So part of modeling requires that we make our covert internal process overt. And it's going to sound crazy, but it means that sometimes we have to talk out loud. Sometimes we have to say, you know, all of these interruptions today, we have to actually say this in our class. All these interruptions today are really getting on my nerves. And I could get very angry, but I'm not going to, because it's not going to help at all. I think when I have a minute, I will go to the office and I will ask if they can make fewer announcements today. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. When I say this out loud in front of my students, I give them a window into my adult self-regulation regulating process that I've now modeled for them. I've shown them a coping strategy that I'm using that they might want to adapt or adopt. So now we're going to look very specifically at how we could build 3 types of resilience: cognitive or mental, thinking resilience; physiological, or in our bodies, how do we build our ability to deal with stress in our bodies; and behaviorally, by what do we do? And we're going to start with the basics, with our body. If you go tomorrow, someone has a, I feel terrible that somebody's baby is crying in the background. If you could mute yourself, mute your microphone, and please take care of baby. That's number 1 priority. If you were to go tomorrow and ask your students, when you're really stressed out, when there's stress with your family, when you are dealing with anxiety about there's too much to do and not enough time, where do you feel it in your body? What do you feel? How do you feel? What are the kinds of things you're likely to hear? You may hear, you know, my palm gets sweaty. I feel like my heart is beating in my chest. I get a headache. I get this soreness in my neck. My stomach gets like butterflies, or I get sour stomach. I feel like I have indigestion. If you want to do a very interesting experiment in your own family, ask your parents where they feel tension and worry and stress in their body, because it runs in families. It actually even runs in our ancestry, so that Ashkenazi Jews are stomach and cardio warriors. We tend to feel anxiety and stress with heartburn and indigestion, and with hypertension and palpitations. People of German and British origin tend to be skeletal muscle warriors. They get more back pain, neck pain, tense shoulders. It runs in by geographic regions. But in the same way that we all might experience stress differently, we also all might find something that calms our stress that is different. So for some people, music really does tame the savage beast and really does calm their body down and decrease stress. For others, journal writing or reading a book. For some, talking to someone. For some, fresh air, distraction, physical exercise. I know that I discovered the role of music only the year that I was in a Velut, and didn't listen to music for a year, and never realized that when I was in the car after a stressful day, how impactful it was for me to play certain CDs. And that when I didn't have that outlet, it really was noticeable that I was holding stress more. Now I'll talk about some specific approaches like meditation, exercise, breathing, relaxation, all of which can be explored and taught. But even if you don't go to those specific items, just asking your students to experiment with the things on this list and to discover and uncover, when you're stressed, what helps you take it down a notch. For some, and by the way, the exact prescription for one is devastating for another. So where some people talking to someone is perfect in calming them down, for others, it's no, I need quiet. I need to be with no one. Nobody can talk to me. If you talk to me, I'll lose it. Okay, I think I have a slide on, a sample breathing exercise, relaxation, mindfulness. These are the three tools that we often use. The issue with breathing is that we tend, if you want to do a little experiment right now, put one hand on your, right under your throat, on your chest, and one hand on your stomach. And take in, go ahead, do it. I'm watching you on camera. I don't see anybody doing. One hand up here, one hand on your belly, and take a deep breath and notice which hand is moving. Take another deep breath. Notice which hand moves more. If this hand, the hand by your chest, moved more, which is the way we breathe when we're under stress, then you are not getting good oxygenation of your brain. That's stress breathing, and it's not good to relax you. If the hand on your belly is breathing more, that's breathing from your diaphragm. It pulls much more air in. And so the simple exercise of having girls do this, young children, if they lay on the floor and you put a light book, not a heavy encyclopedia, not a big Gemara, but a light little book on their belly, and have them take in breaths and try to move the book up and down. It's a great way for them to practice really good belly breathing, which helps you relax. There are also breathing exercises called 3, 4, 7. Breathe in for 3 counts, hold it for 4, breathe out slowly over 7. You can find different examples in books and on websites, but anything that you try that just controls your breathing. And even if our students just learn, before I turn the test paper over, before I open up the assignment, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to take in a deep breath, and I'm going to make sure this hand isn't going, and I'm just going to use that to cue myself to breathe, to make sure I relax. Relaxation. And because of the time limits, I'm not doing an entire relaxation exercise. I just want to give you a sample of what it is like. If we have time at the end, we can do more. But there are basically two types of relaxation. One is passive relaxation, which is really meditation. And the other is what's called progressive muscle relaxation. Progressive muscle relaxation is easier to teach and it's easier to learn because it's active. There's a series of active actions that we do, and we can do them together. You can do them. I'm going to do them as I'm saying them. We're just going to relax our right hand for now and our right arm. We're going to do that by alternately tensing and relaxing different muscles in our hand and our arm. So we're going to start by making a fist with our right hand. We're going to squeeze that fist very, very tightly and then extend our right arm out as far as we can. And as you do that, you can feel tension build up from your fingertips to your wrist. Hold that tension. Feel how tense your muscles feel all the way up to your shoulder. Hold it, hold the tension, and then really slowly open your fist. Very slowly, let your hand rest on your chair or on the table. If you've done it, you will probably feel a tingling, warm sensation now as your muscles relax. And notice the difference between relaxed muscles and tensed muscles. A progressive muscle relaxation does this with every muscle in the body. So you do right arm, right leg, left arm, left leg, stomach, chest, neck and shoulders, and the face. And by the end, let me tell you, you're wonderfully relaxed. There are tapes you can get of relaxation that have also music in the background as you're doing these exercises. And the goal of relaxation is not that I'm going to spend all day tensing and relaxing different muscle groups. The goal is that eventually my body learns what relaxed muscles feel like. And with just a simple cue like relax, chill, let it go, I'm able to get my muscles in a more relaxed state. Mindfulness is getting an enormous amount of attention in education today. It is a very, very powerful technique, but it is not an easy technique to learn or to do. All mindfulness really is being totally mindful and present in the moment, whatever it is you're doing, and allowing your thoughts to flow without judgment. Two parts of that are challenging, and they're challenging for exactly the reasons that you put that your students are stressed. Okay, I have so much to do and I don't have enough time. Now you want me to sit still and just be in this moment and just feel the chair under me and just hear the noises around me, and any thought that comes into my head, which includes thoughts like I'm stupid, I'm never going to finish, I'm never going to get my work done, to just not judge myself for having those thoughts, but to try to come back to what the chair feels like that I'm sitting in and what the table feels like underneath my hand. Not so easy. It's hard to learn to have that kind of quiet focus. But I am seeing and reading now lots and lots of schools that are incorporating this into the day. I think we actually have, and it's interesting because there are discussions about whether mindfulness is problematic from a halakhic point of view. Does it come from Buddhist tradition? My answer is mindfulness is the same as kavana. It doesn't come from Buddhist tradition. We had it first. We have Gedolim and sages who would talk about their preparation for prayer and how they would center themselves and empty their minds of the narishkeit of the world in order to be able to daven with kavana, to find their time to be with the Almighty. That's what mindfulness is. And we have a naturally easy place to insert it in our day, in tefillah. Imagine saying, and again, I know the day's crazy, and I know that students may not all arrive at exactly the same moment, but imagine finding a few minutes during morning davening to say, total quiet in the room, and we are just taking time to just be here. And we're just going to empty our minds, and we're just going to focus on just being here, not doing anything else. It could be, it is talk. There, people are talking about it being very powerful. Okay. The next area that I want to talk about building resilience is mental, cognitive. How do we help our students develop ways of thinking about the world and about things that happen in the world, and thinking about themselves in ways that are resilience promoting rather than eroding their strength? The gray box is the negative box here. It's the ways we do not want children to think. We do not want children to think that things are inevitable. There's no way, and by the way, I have to say that having worked for many years in secular settings and meeting people from all different traditions, we're really very blessed in that the Jewish hashkafa and tradition is so consistent with resilient worldviews. We do not believe in inevitability. We understand the concept of that our actions make a difference and matter, that it's why we believe in the infinite ability for redemption and for tshuva, because things aren't written in stone and finished and done. We understand that even though we can't understand all of God's doings, that still not everything in the world is uncontrollable or negative or dangerous, and that what we live with at one moment in time is not necessarily static or forever. That we recognize that the world is constantly changing, that each day we get up and we get to say Moda'ani again, and we get to start again. The opposite of that kind of negative gray box is the sunny yellow box, what's called the growth mindset. A belief that I can grow and I can change, and that when I make mistakes, it's not because I have a fixed capacity, I'll never be able to do this, but rather I'm not yet able to do it, but maybe I could become better at it. It's a belief in myself as effective and as capable, as a work in progress. It is a forgiving view of myself and of the world rather than a judgmental view. I sometimes call this way of thinking the developmental approach, because I love to say to kids who will say, oh, I'll never, or I can't, or I can't conceive I would ever. I'll say, there was a time when you didn't, pick some developmentally given path, when you didn't read. There was a day that you did not know how to read. And on that day, you had no idea that the next day you would figure it out and become a reader. But then you did. So did you know on Tuesday that Wednesday was the day you were going to learn how to read? No. You didn't know that. So I have no way of knowing. The fact that you can't do this today in no way tells me that you can't do it tomorrow or the next day or the next day. That to me is also a very freeing but also empowering statement, because it means I assume you'll grow into it at some point. You will develop this skill and the ability. I just don't know when it's going to happen. Resilient worldviews and thinking are views that say change is a part of living. I've talked about this developmental. We have to keep perspective that at different ages, children understand things differently. And so that we can't expect very young children to have the same understanding that change is a part of living as older children can understand. A resilient worldview is also being able to celebrate movement towards goals, even when they're very small goals. I was able to get one thing done today on my list. I know there were 27 things, but it's really good that I got one thing done. I could get no things done. And avoid seeing crises as unsurmountable is another piece. And we can't think about our community without thinking about the role of faith and emunah and our belief, both in ourselves and in Hashem, in being able to provide the kind of change that is going to allow us to move forward. I think I have a slide about before I get to that. I may have a slide later on. I'm not sure. I can't remember. So I want to just say it while I think of it. Part of resilient thinking also has to do with how do I see mistakes and errors? Do I see them as an indication of I will never be able to, or I'm a terrible failure or loser? Or have I succeeded as an educator? Have I succeeded as a student myself in understanding that mistakes are not only a part of learning, mistakes are the central part of learning. And this is one of my favorite stories. When my youngest son was learning to ride a bicycle, he was one of those children like Devorah, who when he makes a mistake throws things. So the first time he fell off his two-wheel bicycle, and I live in a neighborhood where boys have to ride bikes. You have no social life if you don't ride to a friend's house. So this was a chiyuv. We had to get him to ride the bike. But he fell off the first time and threw the bike on the ground and said, "Bikes are stupid. I'm never getting on a bike again." And I thought for a moment, how am I going to do this? How am I going to cajole this child and get him back on the bike? And he's going to fall again, for sure. How am I going to manage this? Do I just leave it on the, for a day or two, we'll come back to it. And then I just had this idea. If I say so myself, it was brilliant. It was the necessity of the moment, but it was brilliant. I said, oh, I'm so sorry, honey. I made a terrible mistake. I never told you about the falling. He says, well, yeah, you didn't tell me, and I don't want to fall, and I'm not getting on a bike again. I said, no, I didn't tell you. You have to fall. The first part of learning to ride a bike is the falling. And I started getting very professional and technical sounding. I said, the proprioceptive part of your brain has to know how to fall, because where your brain is in space vis-a-vis the bicycle has to be developed with your motoric coordination. And he's like, 7, looking at me like, this really sounds very important. I said, so you get on the bicycle, and I'm so sorry I didn't tell you this the first time, and ride from here to the corner, but you have to fall 5 times from here to the corner. You have to, because that's how the proprioception is going to develop. And your balance muscles are going to click in, but only if you fall 5 times. And he's looking at me like I'm kind of crazy. And I said, all right, if you fall 4 times, that's okay. But at least 4 from here to the corner. And of course, he would never fall. And every time he fell, he said, was that good? Was that good? Did I fall okay? I said, great falling. That is exactly what I needed you to do. And after that incident, I realized that in education, we often talk about making failure and mistakes okay. But that's not enough. We have to actually make failure and mistakes the central part of learning. We have to say, this is critical. Please try these problems, get them wrong, because through your errors, you'll learn. I teach graduate students, including students who are getting their doctorate and writing a dissertation, a massive tome of a study. It's anywhere from 90 to 230 pages, 300 pages long. And I've had to teach students, graduate students, getting a doctorate, I've had to say to them, you're not writing this once. You are going to write it and rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it at least 7, 8, 15 times before it's finished. So just get used to put it on paper and know it's wrong. And you're going to come back to it and you'll make it right. But it's okay to put down something that's wrong. Otherwise, you'll never start writing. So think about how we teach about mistakes and making mistakes. How do we build cognitive resilient thinking? So part of it is helping our students do some cognitive hygiene when they have non-resilient thinking in their head. How do we do that? We can ask students, all of us have a script running in our head. I'm so old, I used to call it a record playing in our head. But kids don't know what records are anymore. So you could say, what's on your iPod? What's in your earphones? What's on your Bluetooth? What's playing on your playlist? I'm not talking about songs. I'm talking about the sentences, the ideas that come up and go round and round over and over in your head. Generally, many of those sentences are neutral or positive. There are sentences like, I have to remember to take my vitamins. I really love orange juice. Those are neutral, those are not. But if we find among those sentences things that are making us anxious, like, oh my gosh, there's not enough time. I have so much work to do. I'm never going to get it done. And if that is what's playing over and over in our head, then we have to ask ourselves 2 questions. Question 1 is it true? Am I accurate? Now, adolescents and young children, for different reasons, are not always accurate judgers of time and needs. And, one of my sons used to come home and complain about the hours and hours and hours he had of homework. And his brothers would say, watching this dance, he really has 15 minutes of homework. If he would do it, he would save so much time if he would just not complain. Like he spends more complaining time than he does doing the homework. But in his mind, his perception was that it was just unbearably long amount of time it was going to take him. So the first question to ask is this accurate? And a student may say either to themselves or to you, yes, I think it is accurate. I think I do have a lot to do and not enough time. Or the student who's anxious about family issues, yes, it is accurate. Things are troubling in my family. I'm really worried about a parent's health. I'm really worried about an older sibling's shidduch not going through. I'm really worried about our family's finances. These may be very real and reasonable true worries. So then you have to go to question 2. Question 2 is, even given that this is real and possibly true, is this helpful? Is holding this idea in my head and going over and over and over this idea many, many times, is this helping me? And if it is not, then I need to think about, how do I switch out a different thought? How do I change it? How do I choose an alternate, reasonable thought? Now, we have to be careful here. If we say to a student, oh, let's just all think happy thoughts. You're thinking you don't have enough time to finish everything. Just put the idea in your head that you have plenty of time and you'll finish with no problem. Well, our human brain will immediately reject that because it's too simplistic. We have to validate the struggle. The thought might be, yeah, I have a lot of work to do and there are some real time concerns, but I think if I just organize myself, I can get through it. Or what I would call the Christopher Reeve technique. Christopher Reeve was the very famous actor who played Superman in the movies and then suffered a traumatic brain injury falling off a horse and became a quadriplegic and lived his life in a wheelchair until he was nifter a few years ago. Very, very compromised. Christopher Reeve said that he spent 25 minutes every day in the morning after he woke up and did his morning routine, which had nothing he could do on his own. Everything he had to be assisted. But he spent 25 minutes wallowing in self-pity. He allowed himself 25 minutes to think about, I've been Superman, look how much I've lost. It's terrible. I'll never play ball with my children. Look at all the terrible things. And then it was packed away for the day. That's it. That's my 25 minutes and I'm done. So another strategy when I have these negative ideas running in my head is to say, okay, I'm really worried that I have a lot to do and not enough time to do it. I'm really worried about my family and what's going on there. Great. I'm allowing myself the next 10 minutes of worry time, and then I'm putting it away. I'm focusing on other things. I'm going to use distraction. I'm going to use other thoughts in my head to allow myself to be more resilient. Okay, behavioral. How do we build resilience? By looking at behavior. So the non-resilient approach to life is to avoid things. To approach things that are difficult, that are challenging, that's a coping skill. To run away from things that are difficult or challenging is generally not healthy, although we do have to be reasonable and say, we don't want children running into danger. We don't want children to say, oh, I don't have to, my family is having arguments and I can go home and get in the middle of their arguments. I don't have to avoid that. I have to be there all the time. Some avoidance might be healthy to say, you know what? Some nights I'm going to study at a friend's house. It's quieter there. So we have to balance this fight or flight, this approach and avoid dichotomy, and help students to approach when it's appropriate, to cope and deal with stressors when it's appropriate, to avoid in the degree that it's healthy, but not to build large avoidant structures. In other words, to have a child who says, well, tonight I'm going to study at someone's house, and then maybe I'll move in with a friend, and then maybe I'll, again, in certain circumstances may be necessary, but to keep on avoiding facing a stress may not be the healthiest of choices. We can help students build their behavioral resilience by making approach easier by giving small steps. So I want to avoid math because math stresses me out. Well, okay, why don't we try doing 3 problems tonight rather than avoiding all of it? And when we're going to take small steps. If you do 3 problems tonight and you did well, maybe next time you're doing math, you'll do 5 problems. We also can encourage behavioral resilience by saying, okay, if your comfort zone is here, could you go just a little smidge outside your comfort zone? Not in your comfort zone here, go to up here, but could we push you a little bit? Generally, you're not so social. You tend to be, spend time on your own. You're very happy that way, but could you, I'm not saying you have to go to the biggest social event of the year, give a speech and be the chairperson. No, I'm saying, but could you go with one friend, bowling, and just pick a small encouragement beyond the comfort zone. What are some resilience builders when students are in the middle of stress? And some of these we've already talked about, but it just is some general guidelines that bear mentioning. Social relationships and remaining connected to people is a strong resilience builder. Tons of research says friendships are insulating and supportive. And to the extent that our students have ways to be socially connected, that they have friendships, whether those friendships are in school, beyond school, it's really important. What happens sometimes in times of stress is that we cut ourselves off from those social connections. And that is not a healthy choice. Again, you may need some pulling back, but not totally eliminating socializing, particularly for adolescents. It's a very big warning sign if they totally disconnect socially, because it's so much a part of their lives. contain. These are all the C's of resilience building. What do I mean by contain? If we are really, it's the example of my student, my patient, and her worry about time, and then endlessly looking at her schedule and calendars. We have to watch, what we talk about, and how we hyper focus versus distract ourselves in a good balance that allows us to remain healthier and more focused on the positive. Again, everyone is different, but I find now, particularly with the just news media, alerts come up on my phone if there's something that happened in Israel, and alerts come up if there's a hurricane warning, and alerts come up if this is out, and that the emergency alerts. It's hard not to feel like the world is in constant crisis. And if every minute I'm going to look at, what's the latest news blurb on the earthquake near Florida in the Caribbean today? What's the latest? If I watch it too much, I know my stress level will go up. So how do we use our self-management to say that's not healthy for me and I'm not going to do it? The C of consider, we've already talked about. That's our cognitive housekeeping, thinking about what's running in our mental script. Credit, we've also already talked about. It means, how do I give myself credit and say, wow, even with all that's on my plate, even with all the stressors of my family, even with all the work I have to do, it's pretty amazing that I was able to focus tonight and do these 3 pages of math. That's, you know what? Very good. Focus on what I'm succeeding at and not only on what I'm not doing. And this is really important, and it's really important for our students, but they forget in times of stress that they are a biological being and that they need food and rest. We are not our best selves when we're tired. We are not our best selves when we're hungry. Think about, I'm getting feedback. Think about why the last time you were really hungry, and were you your most patient and your most resilient self if you were really hungry? Think about how hard it is on fast days. But also care means our emotional and spiritual needs being met. With the group of educators yesterday, somebody may need to turn off their mic because it's getting feedback. In terms of physical, emotional, and spiritual needs being met, I was with a group of Jewish educators at a conference recently, and we did a wonderful icebreaker, which I think is terrific, and that is, think of a question you'd like to ask everyone in the room, any Jewish educator you would meet, and then get up and rotate around the room and ask the same question to every person that you meet. And my question, the question I asked people was, what is your spiritual fuel? What drives your spiritual engine? What gets you going spiritually? And for some people it was prayer. For some people it was learning. For some people it was community, feeling a part of something and being with family. But I thought it was a great question. I'm now going to be asking people routinely, what is their spiritual fuel? But in the same way, we have to think about, what's your emotional fuel? Is it being with people? Is it reading, moving stories? Is it taking care of yourself and just giving yourself a good cry, or a good laugh? Reading something funny that will let you laugh. And there's no D in this list, because drugs are very poor resilience builders. In times of stress, people do turn to drugs, both illicit and legal drugs, caffeine and alcohol, but they do not build resilience at all. They really are examples of avoidance. They just take us away. The last few things I want to say, then I want to open for discussion and questions, is that how do we teach about resilience to build resilience? Could we actually, in our schools, find time and way to teach about resilience? And how would we do that? Well, one way is we could promote in our students a way that they reflect on themselves by readings, videos, and looking at historical and cultural events. If we found a particular historical event or a novel and a character, and we said, let's look at the characters that succeeded in the face of challenge. Who do you think is the hero here and why? What challenge or dilemma did this person overcome? What personal strengths did this hero possess? What choices did he or she have to make? I'm reading this and I'm thinking about all of the survivors I heard interviewed on Holocaust Remembrance Day. You know, how did other people support the hero? What did the hero learn? How do we use the same personal strengths when we overcome obstacles in our own lives? And that last question is really the reason for this whole educational exercise. Obviously, again, I'm going to say what I said before. It's so challenging in a dual curriculum environment where you have so much to cover and so little time. It's very tempting to say, how can we do this? Well, don't do it with new curriculum. But if you went to your teacher and said, your teachers, whether it's a history teacher or a Chumash teacher, and you said, we want to look at Moshe Rabbeinu, we want to look at Devorah, we want to look at Yoshua, we want to look at what challenge or dilemma did they overcome and through which personal strengths? What are the choices they had to make? Did they have supporters in the story? What did they learn through this experience? And is there anything we can take from this to our own lives? Is there a way, lahavdil, you know, we're not Moshe Rabbeinu, we're not even Devorah, the prophetess, but are there things that we learn from reading about this character that we say, you know, I could see where this kind, even the idea that having the right people surrounding you makes you more resilient and helps you make good choices might be something that I learned from a historical story. We can also build student self-knowledge by engaging them in their own storytelling, asking them to write about where does their own strength come from? Write about a person who supported them. And what did they get from that person and what did they learn about themselves? Write about someone you helped during a stressful time. What did you do and what did you learn about yourself in that process? And as you went through a challenge, what helped or got in your way? What did you take away from that experience that will help you in the future? And here, I knew I had a failing slide. So here, this is, you know, back to my son and falling off the bicycle. We have to create a culture where failure, setbacks, and disappointment are an expected and honored part of learning. Students are praised not for success, but for their hard work, their perseverance, and their grit, that they stuck to it. We have to hold students accountable for producing their own work, not bringing in something that someone much smarter, their parents or an expert did, but efforts which they feel ownership and internal reward, that they really feel, wow, I accomplished this, I did this. And the last, I think this may be the last slide or second to last slide, none of this is as effective. Nothing we do as educators is as effective if we haven't first invested in the relationship. Because if our students don't see us as important people, if our students don't believe that we see them as important people, then why should they listen to what we say or copy what we do? If we want to be role models for them, and we do, if we want to be chinuch professionals in their lives, if we want to teach them, if we want to stand in the position of the sage, the expert, then we have to show them, make sure that they know that we care. And they can only learn that if we've invested in a relationship. We have to know them. They have to feel heard, understood, and validated. It's so, so important. Last thoughts. Lisa Miller, who is a secular academic at Columbia University Teachers College, has written a beautiful book called The Spiritual Child. She's a psychologist, and she's documented very clearly how important spirituality is as a tool in that toolbox, making us resilient. I think that this is a piece that all Jewish children, I want them to know, I don't know that they appreciate how incredibly fortunate we are to have such a beautiful tradition and religion that understands the role that spirituality can and should play in our lives, and that it can be such a source of strength and support. Adults are so important as resilience builders. Think about what a teacher, I don't think I have the quote here, but Chaim Ganat, a very famous educator, writes, and I'm paraphrasing, I won't get it exactly right, but he writes, I've come to the frightening conclusion that I am either the element of culture or the element of growth. As a teacher, in each instance, I determine whether a child is humiliated or whether a child is grown and supported, whether a child is torn apart or whether a child is built up. It's all me. We could think about perfect examples of classrooms that are resilience pillars, of teacher actions that are resilience flattening, that do not make resilient children. So that we can think of real obvious ones, like the one I gave before. The teacher, rips up the paper and says, "You'll never be a speller. You'll never be a reader." But there are more subtle ones. If the teacher who only posts perfect final copies. I once visited a preschool in another country where they were making snowmen. Just representations of snowmen with some fake snow on it and a felt hat and a carrot nose, etc. And I said, it's so interesting, but every preschool child's snowman looks exactly the same. How is that? And the teacher said, oh, well, we do it for them. So even though it had a child's name on it, the aide sits with the child and literally makes the snowman for each child. Now, as disturbing as this was to me, I then sat in a first grade class, and the first grade teacher asked the students, it was a math class, to fold their paper in fourths, in half and then in half again. I have to tell you, I've never seen anything like it. This was winter time, so it was the middle of the school year. The students had no idea what to do. Wait, do I fold it first this way or then do I fold it? Do 2 times, teacher? Could you help me? And I'm thinking, well, of course, they can't follow a simple direction or take a risk or understand how to do anything because they just finished preschool where everything was done for them. We as adults can, in subtle and not so subtle ways, build children's resilience. We rob them of resilience if we do everything for them. Actions and routine in times of stress, it's why we work really hard after trauma or tragedy to get kids back to school and back into their regular routine as quickly as possible. And the value of mastery, of the idea that I can be in charge, I can control something, putting children in charge of something when they come back to school or come in saying, you're going to give out the pencils. It may seem very small, but it is actually helpful. This is if you have never seen this video, it's really quite amazing. A preschool teacher in Israel, when the rockets were falling several years ago in Sderot, worked with her students to create this song, which has hand movements that they do after they, within their 7 seconds, when a siren goes off, have run to the safe room. She noticed that students were very anxious, not surprising, as they are running to be safe from bombs, and it's happening routinely. So she taught them this song, Seva Dom, Red Siren. Hurry, hurry, hurry to a safe area. Hurry, 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 because now it's a bit dangerous. My heart is beating and it has movements. Boom, bada, boom, boom, boom. My body is shaking. Doom, da, doom, doom, doom. But I am overcoming because I am a little different. Falling down. Boom, they all fall down. Now we can stand up. Our body, we shake, shake, shake. Our legs, we loosen, loosen, loosen. Breathe in deep. Breathe out far. Breathe in deep. We can laugh. Ha, 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 ha. It's all gone. That's the all clear sign. And I feel good. It's all over. Yes. And you see these preschoolers sitting in the shelter singing this song. It gave them a sense of mastery. They developed the hand movements. They made, this is what we do when we go to the shelter. It gave them an element, a feeling that they're in control. So that is, I think, all the slides. The only thing that I will add is that very nicely mentioned my book, which was just published by Apples and Honey Press. It's called Mommy, Can You Stop the Rain? It is a book about resilience, and I'll see if I can get it up, and if I can, I will share my screen with you. It is it is a book really written to help parents understand their role in helping children when trouble happens. And it grew out of my experience working with families after trauma, and when in times of deep stress, that parents were afraid to comfort their children because they kind of felt that maybe I can't really comfort. So this is the title page. You know, Mommy, I'll just share with you 2 pages. Mommy, can you stop the rain? No, I cannot stop the rain, but I will dry your hair and wrap you in a towel warm from the dryer. Then we will eat iced cookies with pink sprinkles on top. So it's a juxtaposition of, I may not be able to do everything for you, child, but there are ways that I can provide comfort as a parent. It will be available on Amazon. You can see it on Amazon now, but you can't you can't order it on Amazon until April 1st. Okay, I want to open the chat and open the floor to questions. I'm looking at the chat room now. A question, what do you do? I'm assuming, Kavi, that what do you do with very low level of handling frustration, low self-esteem, student challenges, always afraid to try? Yes, there is I'm reading, there's a Chabad Rebbe who has a mindfulness based on Hasidus. There's also a woman who's written a book on Jewish mindfulness. It's not so strange. How do we handle students with a very low level of frustration? I think that part of it, like with my son, if there's a way to make what is frustrating them actually success, it's good that you fall. Could you fall more? That can be helpful. I also think that sometimes it's helpful to predict frustration, to say, I know this is going to be really hard and you're going to get really upset. And when you're getting upset, here's what you could do. You can walk away. You can ask for help. What would be helpful for me when you're getting frustration. And for someone who's afraid to try, they're often afraid to try because it's too big. It's huge. Can I break this down to a really tiny piece? Can I say you're afraid to I can't think of a good example. You know, you're afraid to ask a question in class. Could you just ask me a question after class? Is there a way I can make the big small? Could you write down your question and leave it for me after class? And then at the beginning of class tomorrow, could I read it? Could I read your question? Could I say, Shira left me this question yesterday. It's such a good question. I want to read it to you, etc. This is a really good question from Shana Goldberg. How do you balance the person who leans on a friend when they're stressed, but it's too much for the friend? And that's a huge issue in schools. It is a huge issue with our girls' schools, especially when we are acculturating our girls to have wonderful middos, to really care for each other, to be balat chesed, and then they get overwhelmed. And they don't want to be nice to Shifra anymore because, you know, like she needs me every 2 minutes and I want to do my own work. Here's where, at least in the younger grades and in you know, with younger students, I think that if we're seeing it in school, that we can insert ourselves as adults a little bit. If we see that Shifra is constantly leaning on, I don't know, I'm using the same names all the time, is constantly leaning on Esty, then we can say, you know what? I'm gonna be Shifra's partner today. I'm gonna help out. We can say to our our educators, can we step in as adults? Because Shifra is like taking too many withdrawals out of the friendship bank here, and she's gonna ruin this relationship if we don't support this in some way and help it out. It's harder with older students because it becomes, older students don't want to work with the teacher. They don't, you know, as much. It's, they live their social lives less under the supervision of adults. And so it's harder to figure out how to push in. But we do, you know, educators do control some elements of time together. We can assign who sits where in a classroom. We can assign work partners and work groups so that if we see that this is a problem, then we can say, you know what, usually I allow, and we don't have to say this out loud, this is in our own head, usually I allow the girls to pick their own partners, but I see what's going on with Shifra and Esty, and if Shifra picks Esty to work with, Esty's just had it. That's not going, I'm going to pick the, I'm going to give the kids a the explanation that I'm doing this because this unit requires such and such. I'm not going to tell them I'm doing it because of Shifra and Esty, but I'm going to pick the partners this time. Next time you'll be able to pick partners. Thank you so much, Rivka Fishman, for your suggestion of starting each class with 2 minutes of calm down activities. This is amazing, and that 2 girls choose what you do. I would love to see your 1 minute breathing activities. I don't know what EFT stands for. You have put 1 minute breathing activities, 60 seconds or music. It's so true that we think all the time that when we, you know, like, I don't have time to do this. We're a little bit like that student who says, I have too much to do and not enough time. And our anxiety pushes us into what is not really the best practice. The best practice is, morning, everybody. How is everybody? Look at these faces. So happy to see you. Girls, let's start our day out with good breathing. Let's start our day out with beautiful sounds of music. Let's get ready to learn. Oh my gosh, we have such amazing things to do today. 2 minutes. Let's just get in our heads. And you will be more productive. And by the way, the research supports that. The research says if we were to look at how much time we lose in our teaching because of behavioral infractions, inattention, mind wandering, you have to realize it's at least 5 minutes a day, which means by the end of every week, it's 25 minutes. By the end of a month, we've lost 2 hours of teaching time. If 2 minutes a day could regain even half of that, we've got an hour back each month. that's substantive time. And I would say it's not just time, but it's also quality of the time. More examples of distraction. Thank you, Ruti. So here's the thing about distraction. And people are like, we go to the phone to calm down, for example. I don't love that as distraction, although I will say that I play solitaire. I'm a very big game player. I love cribbage and solitaire, and I would play with my children games growing up, but my children are grown and out of the house, so I have no partner to play cribbage with, but I can play on my phone. So every once in a while I will say, you know, I need to just chill. I'm going to play a round of cribbage. But the other, and that is a distraction, but distractions don't have to come from the phone. Distractions could be, and by the way, this is another phenomenal thing to build in your classroom in the same way that you, Rivka shared that she has a playlist of 1-minute breathing activities. I've seen educators who have, you know, just a folder of coloring pages, you know, mazes, Sudokus, crossword puzzles, etc. That if you need something, and some of them could be self-exploration sheets, they could be journaling prompts, they could be, but you know, pick one out of the page and you have free time, you have time, you need to chill, go to my chill out folder and pick something that you think will help you chill. Great. Okay, here's the other piece about distraction. I have a huge worry in my head. And I say, I want to distract myself from the huge worry, which is incredibly potent and powerful in my mind. I need a distraction that's as potent and powerful. So simply saying, I'm going to think happy thoughts doesn't work. And simply saying, I'm going to think about my favorite color, it doesn't work. Because the mental activity that worry is using is very powerful. So I need a distraction that uses more mental activity than that. For me, it would be, you know, anything with math uses more mental activity. You know, so I'm going to count backwards by 7s. I'm going to, not just am I going to remember the lyrics of my favorite Mordechai Bet David song, but I'm going to think about all the songs on the albums with it and how many songs come before and after that song. And in the lyrics of that song, how many times the word shalom happens. Now that's really mentally engaging to do that. So that's going to distract me. So distractions can be mental with nothing else, or they can be a physical distraction, like I'm going to play something on my phone. I'm going to do something, you know, on paper. I'm going to do a crossword puzzle. I'm going to do something that's going to mentally engage me. It has to require mental energy. If it's mindless, for example, if I'm going to crochet a kippah, it doesn't work because that requires no mental energy. That's all motor memory. It's all routine work, and that will not distract you enough, usually, from a worry. You can worry and knit at the same time, but you may not be able to think and have your worry script run while you do a crossword puzzle, or while you do mental math, or while you try to remember the state capitals in alphabetical order. So I hope that answers the question. In our last few minutes, any other comments or questions? Either open your mic and ask them, or ask them in the chat room. I also appreciate, Rivka, your comment that really when we're teaching Tanakh or history as well, I really believe that we can't ever teach one thing at a time when we're in a yeshiva day school. Everything we teach has to be at least 2 things. So if I'm teaching history, am I also teaching midos? If I'm teaching halacha, you know, am I also teaching bein adam lechavero? Like I don't have enough time to have everyone be a class, so I have to interweave them. And there are times that this is easier than others. It is harder for the math teacher to say, how am I teaching Ben Adam L'Chaveiro in math class? So when you can't leverage your content to teach it, you can leverage your process. So I'll tell you about a math class I observed in a public school. It was a co-ed class. It was public school. The boys and girls, 4th grade, were sitting in a horseshoe formation, and they were doing rapid fire review of homework. So Johnny gave the answer to question number 1. And then obviously the teacher had taught them that Johnny had to pick a girl in the class to answer question number 2, who had to pick a boy to answer question 3. That in and of itself wasn't amazing. What was amazing is that as I was watching this in the horseshoe, that every time somebody picked somebody to answer the question, everybody's body in the horseshoe oriented toward that person who was answering, and then back to this person, and then back to that, and then back to this, so that you could at any point in time know who was talking and everyone was looking at them. And at one point it didn't happen, and the teacher stopped and said, "Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, we are not being respectful listeners. Remember, where do your eyes and ears and body face when someone is talking?" And everybody then went back to their, looking at the person talking. I was blown away by the decorum and respect that you felt in this class. And she also prefaced, by the way, this review by saying, what kind of answer is a right answer? And the class kind of in unison said, any answer. And she said, that's right, because we learn from every answer. Some answers may not be correct, but I think it was not what's a right answer. What answer is a good answer? Any answer is a good answer. What answer is a correct answer? That's an answer that has the correct math. Do we always have a correct answer? No. Do we laugh when someone has an answer that's not correct? No, because we're learning from that too. So she primed the pump for this great behavior. At the end of class, I went up to her and I said, I just loved watching you teach. This is amazing. How much time did it take for you to teach the students and have, really, they're very polished at doing this. She said, well, it took really all of September, maybe a little bit in October. And then after Thanksgiving break, I had to review it because they'd eroded a little bit. But now it's middle of the year. This is just the way my class runs. I said, so you lost, like 5 weeks of the school year to really focus on this decorum. I guess you're a little behind the other 4th graders. She said, we're 2 units ahead. When we create resilient classrooms, when we create the structures that say, everybody matters here, we are going to support all your growth, we are going to find a way that failures are okay, we're going to treat everyone with respect, we all learn better, we all go further. And it's been a pleasure talking with all of you this evening. I'm sorry about the little loss of voice there. I'm glad it came back. Didn't take too long. This was good. A few weeks ago, it was not so good. So it's getting much better.
Rona, I want to thank you so much for this powerful evening. I was furiously taking notes on my phone while I was watching everything on the screen. I know that we're all going to have so much to easily implement into our classrooms and into our schools. I want to add that I have a talk that I do with my students with each class each year. It's called Don't Dump on Your Friends. And I actually did it in Beis Rivka in 2 parts for the 9th and 10th and the 11th and 12th a couple of years ago. But it's on that topic that was brought up about kids who lean on each other too hard and share too much with a friend, and how we build resilience with our kids by teaching them, both the kids who share what to share and what not to share with your friends, and giving the strong kids, the resilient kids, language to tell their friends where their boundaries are. Mm-hmm. So
I think that's great. I think that in general, by the way, classes that help today's young people learn and question and understand what a friend is and what it means to be a friend, what it means to be friendly, even to someone who's not your friend, and things that are not reasonable as part of friendship. Because I find they've got some kind of unusual ideas about what, what friendship is, including, well, if you're her friend, you can't be my friend. Friendship isn't control. It's not an act of control. You are not the boss of your friend, in the same way that your friend is not your personal psychotherapist or your financial supporter, or that's not what a friend is there for. So I think that anything that talks about those limits are amazing.
Thank you, Rona. I'm going to be reviewing my notes for weeks to come and sharing it with the teachers in my school, because I know that they need to hear it. We need to hear it repeatedly. So thanks so much. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
And we'll see you around.